Good morning and thanks for tuning in. You're watching our mid-morning edition of Arirang News on this Friday, May 1st. Coming to you live from Seoul, I'm Shin Se-min. Before we dive right in, these are the stories we're following at this hour. U.S. President Trump says everything will be fine when asked about North Korea's Kim Jong-un, adding to growing speculation that Kim may in fact be seriously ill, just as many other unconfirmed reports have claimed. Washington's top diplomat says no matter what happens, the U.S. is committed to the North's complete denuclearization. The South Korean economy, heavily reliant on outbound shipments, saw a devastating tank in its exports in April over the coronavirus pandemic and the dip in oil prices. Plus, with the coronavirus damaging the global economy, the European Central Bank keeps rates unchanged. The Eurozone's economy shrunk by 3.8% in the first 3 months this year, the largest decline since records began in the mid-1990s. Amplifying the rumors surrounding the health of the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. U.S. President Donald Trump's comments during a briefing on Thursday local time suggest that Kim may be seriously ill. President Trump on Kim Jong-un again hinted that things aren't as they usually are within the regime. He said he understands what's going on, and he said he can't talk about Kim Jong-un right now, and that he hopes everything will be just fine. His remarks on Kim aren't the first from President Trump this week. He previously said he had a strong idea about Kim's whereabouts, but didn't elaborate further. The state of Kim's health has been the focus of intense scrutiny for weeks after reports suggested a surgical procedure on his heart may have been botched. And as a follow-up to that story, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says Washington is preparing for, quote, any eventuality in North Korea and is closely monitoring the regime as reports continue to swirl about the leader Kim Jong-un's health. Speaking on a radio program Thursday, Pompeo said it's unusual but not unheard of that the leader of North Korea has not been heard from or seen in public for over 2 weeks. Also on the same day, Pompeo said the U.S. remains fully committed to achieving North Korea's final and full denuclearization, regardless of what happens within the regime. Asked whether the U.S. knows about Kim's condition at this point, Pompeo said he had little to add. Also from that, the U.S. Congressional Research Service reported Thursday that Kim's younger sister, Kim Yo-jong, is among the most likely to succeed Kim Jong-un should he become incapacitated or die. Now, shifting focus, South Korea's exports sunk over 24% in April from a year earlier due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the Trade Ministry said on Friday that total outbound shipments last month amounted to around $37 billion, a drop of around a quarter from April last year. Imports were also down almost 16% during that same period, and the country suffered a deficit of around $950 million, breaking its 98-month streak of having more exports than imports. Despite the bad export conditions, including falling global oil prices, exports of biotech products such as COVID-19 test kits went up 29%, and computer shipments jumped by almost 100%. As Europe struggles to fight the coronavirus, its central bank is rolling out a set of measures to respond to this ongoing pandemic. Now, this comes as a president of the European Central Bank warned that the pandemic will push the euro area economy into an economic slump of a magnitude and speed that are unprecedented in peacetime. Our Kim Hyo-sun tells us more.
The chief of the European Central Bank is warning that the coronavirus will push the Eurozone economy into an unprecedented peacetime slump, adding that output in the 19-nation Eurozone is expected to shrink by 5 to 12% this year.
Growth scenarios produced by ECB staff suggest that euro area GDP could fall by between 5% and 12% this year, followed by recovery and normalization of growth in subsequent years. The extent of the contraction and the recovery will depend crucially on the duration and the success of the containment measures.
Against such a background, the ECB Governing Council decided Thursday to leave key interest rates for the euro area unchanged, while it introduced a set of new measures to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. Its governing council said the Eurozone base interest rate will remain at 0%, with the marginal lending and deposit rates remaining at 0.25% and minus 0.5%, respectively.
We decided to keep the key ECB interest rates unchanged. We expect them to remain at their present or lower levels until we have seen the inflation outlook robustly converge to a level sufficiently close to, but below 2%, within our projection horizon, and such convergence has been consistently reflected in underlying inflation dynamics.
The ECB also explained it will further ease conditions on the targeted longer-term refinancing operations in order to support liquidity. These measures add to the central bank's comprehensive response to the pandemic, which mainly includes an $820 billion pandemic emergency purchase program announced in mid-March. Italy, one of the hardest-hit nations in Europe, witnessed its GDP drop by 4.8% on year in the first quarter of the year. Its statistics agency also said it fell 4.7% compared to the last quarter of 2019. This was the biggest drop since current statistical records began in 1995. Meanwhile, finance ministers from the G7 countries held a video conference on Thursday to discuss strategies to accelerate economic activity once they reopen following sweeping lockdowns aimed at containing the pandemic. They agreed to continue coordinating, quote, timely and effective actions in response to the economic fallout. Kim Jong-un, Arirang News.
The total number of COVID-19 cases worldwide has so far topped 3.2 million, with death toll spiking above 231,000. And another big political name has tested positive for the virus. Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin said Thursday that he has the virus, becoming the highest-ranking Russian official to have contracted COVID-19. With that, Russia now has over 100,000 cases after adding over 7,000 new cases in a single day. In the UK, the death toll has jumped to 26,000, and the country's Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who recently recovered from the virus, returned to the daily briefing on Thursday, telling the British people that the country is, quote, past the peak and it's on a downward slope. Over here in Asia, Japan is gearing up to extend its coronavirus emergency for another month from its original end date of May 6th. Japan has confirmed around 15,000 cases, and its death toll is approaching 500. With over 300,000 confirmed cases and 18,000 deaths, New York has been the epicenter of COVID-19 outbreak in the United States. With funeral homes unable to keep up, one New York City funeral home was found to have been storing its bodies in rented trucks. Despite all this, President Trump says federal social distancing guidelines will not be extended. Our Lee Seung-jae tells us more.
On Wednesday, police were called to a neighborhood in Brooklyn after neighbors complained of a strong odor. The odor came from two rented trucks which were storing dozens of bodies after a funeral home was overwhelmed by the number of bodies from the COVID-19 pandemic and resorted to storing them on ice in rented trucks. Since late March, funeral homes in New York City have struggled to keep up with the number of bodies coming in. The city has set up temporary morgues. Hospitals have been using refrigerator tractor trails to move bodies, and crematoriums have been backed up. Funeral directors across the city have called for help as they have run out of space. New York is just a portion of the 1,000-plus COVID-19 deaths the United States has reported each day. Despite this, U.S. President Donald Trump said on Wednesday that the federal government will not be extending its COVID-19 social distancing guidelines when they expire on Thursday. The White House's 30 days to slow the spread guidelines were originally supposed to last 15 days, but were extended by an additional 30 days to encourage Americans to work from home and avoid unnecessary gatherings and trips. The director of the U.S. National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Dr. Anthony Fauci, said Wednesday that it's not out of question that the U.S. could have a viable COVID-19 vaccine by January 2021. He added that the government is quickly working to see whether a vaccine is effective before manufacturing hundreds of millions of doses. Scientists at Oxford University in the UK were a bit more optimistic. They predicted on Wednesday that a vaccine they are developing could be ready by September. 이 승재, Arirang News.
Unemployment continues to be a serious issue in the U.S. as first-time filings for unemployment benefits hit 3.84 million last week alone, bringing the six-week total to over 30 million Americans. While the pace has slowed since last month, experts say current unemployment claims could be undercounted as by much as 12 million, as those who are eligible for benefits are not getting them due to their inability to file or other roadblocks. Among the states that have seen the most number of unemployment filings, Washington showed the biggest gains over the past week with more than 62,000. As part of the ongoing efforts to track the spread of the COVID-19 in South Korea, as well as to prevent a possible reoccurrence of the pandemic, the South Korean government has announced plans for nationwide serum screening. Our Kim Mo-kyun reports.
When a virus enters our bodies, our immune systems create antibodies to fight it and hopefully kill it. If the antibodies win, you recover and become immune. If we relate this to the coronavirus outbreak in South Korea, which has seen thousands of confirmed patients, there's the possibility for antibodies to have been formed not only among them, but also others who've experienced no symptoms. With that in mind, the South Korean government has decided to hold a nationwide serum test to check the effectiveness of the current quarantine measures and keep track of how the public could overcome the virus if it pops up again.
We are planning to enforce a serum screening system to gather data on the infection trend and the immunity level of the public against COVID-19.
Since it's practically impossible to test all citizens, the Ministry of Health and Welfare will link the screening to the National Nutrition Survey, which tests 10,000 citizens from 192 regions nationwide. They will be in the form of blood tests at community health centers. The government expects 71% of participants to agree to take part in the screening program. With Daegu and Gyeongsangbuk-do province being the hardest hit areas in South Korea, the government plans to proceed with the screening in those areas first. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
More than 10 million South Korean visitors travel to member countries of the Association of Southeast Asian Members, or ASEAN, in 2019. According to statistics released by the ASEAN Korea Center on Friday, 10,052,000 visitors travel to countries like Vietnam, Thailand, the Philippines, Singapore, and Malaysia. Throughout the year of 2019, 5.6 million South Koreans visited Japan and 4.2 million visited China. From the ASEAN region, about 2.7 million visitors came to South Korea last year, with the most coming from Thailand, followed by Vietnam and Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Seoul City's tap water, also known as Arisu, is a lot cheaper than tap waters in other big cities around the world. According to a report by the Seoul Metropolitan Government on Friday, Seoul's tap water costs less than 50 cents per 1,000 liters. New York's tap water costs about $2.75 for the same amount, and the price in London would cost you $1.90. Put that into perspective, officials say 1,000 liters of tap water can make some 2,800 cups of coffee.
Good morning. It felt pretty warm this morning, starting in the mid to upper teens, but by the afternoon, most regions will see highs hitting the upper 20s to low 30s, feeling more like early July rather than May under sunny skies. So the first day of May is kicking off with some summer-like heat for most regions, while Busan will have seasonably warm temperatures at 22 degrees Celsius under mostly sunny skies and good air quality nationwide. So don't forget your sunscreen. But also note that a dry weather advisory remains in place for much of the country, so be careful with fire and be sure to drink plenty of water to stay hydrated. The sudden hot spell will be short-lived with rain in the forecast for some parts of the country over the weekend. But Children's Day next Tuesday looks to be warm and sunny across the country. But it also marks Ipa, the beginning of summer, according to East Asian calendars. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the globe.
And that wraps it up for this edition of Arirang News. As always, thanks for tuning in and goodbye.